Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, November 12th Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting, and I will turn it over to Mr. Copeland.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert, members of the board and public. I would be remiss if I didn't begin this meeting by expressing the board's thanks to veterans on this Veterans Day that we're celebrating. Appreciation to all those who served. This evening, we are going to have three reports that were part of the curriculum committee of the board last week. And with that, we will begin with a comprehensive plan, final presentation from Mr. Cody. This, you're making your way to, as he makes his way, this is, I guess, the culmination, correct, of the process that we went through to develop our comprehensive plan under the aegis of the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Mr. Cody.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
This evening, I'd like to share with you, as Mr. Copeland stated, sort of the final round of the presentations for the statewide comprehensive school plan. The comprehensive plan is a mandate by the Pennsylvania Department of Education for all school districts across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It really is an action plan outlining the district's commitment to ensuring that we provide a quality education for all of our students, as well as a quality professional development plan for our staff. This comprehensive plan describes the educational program and the services that are provided within the school district, and those programs and services which are also accessed by the school district. On the screen, you'll see the process overview of when this plan actually started taking place. You'll note in September of 2017 is when this particular plan began. Ms. Kimberly Frazier in the spring of last year presented to the board and the public her special education plan. That plan was on review for 28 days before the board took action to approve that. That plan was finally submitted through the Pennsylvania Department of Education in May, which led our continued work around the comprehensive plan through the summer. Our comprehensive plan was reviewed. A presentation was provided to the school board in September, and that particular plan was on public display for 28 days starting October 1st, and that brings us to you tonight to share a final presentation of this comprehensive plan. The board will be looking to take action during our regular committee meeting, business committee meeting, to vote on the comprehensive plan, and we are looking to make a final submission to the state of Pennsylvania on November 30th. The plan focuses on core foundational parts, and these core foundations of our school district. We like to think of these core foundations of our school district for how we educate students and support their learning. We also like to think about how we measure that particular success and how we create supportive and safe learning environments for our students, as well as safe and supportive learning environments and teaching environments for our staff. We identify different various types of resources that we use across the school district in terms of print text, digital text, and community resources. We also think about how we support the professional learning for our staff on an ongoing basis. Through the comprehensive planning process, the planning committee kept the district strategic plan the highest priority, so that we weren't taking a look at two separate plans, one that is a sort of a compliance piece that we need to file with the state of Pennsylvania, and then our strategic plan. So there was a really intentional merge of those two plans to come together. So we've aligned the 5 goals of the district strategic plan directly to the comprehensive plan, which is required by the state of Pennsylvania. The next few slides we'll be taking a look at each one of our goals, and each goal had 3 different focuses. One is the foundational shift, which is really the what. A second area was the shared visions for each one of our goals and our pathways, which is really the why. And then for each one of those particular goals, we had strategies or steps of implementation. So I'd like to just focus on those particular components of each goal. So the foundational shift for redefining success is that we would transform how we define and measure and report student achievement with a focus on students' individual growth and the mastery in areas that extend beyond traditional academic indicators in the classroom. So many of these particular strategies that we took a look at and identified within the plan are looking at creating protocols that measure development, emotional, physical well-being, creativity, critical thinking, the love for learning, and really allowing students to become innovative in the work that they do in the classroom. We also re-examine the grading practices so that growth is reported more comprehensively across the school district. And an example of that is our exploration teams looked at the traditional grading practices and shifted those practices such as class rank, grade point average, and valedictorian. The foundational shift for transformative curriculum, we were really focusing on shifting from content silos to a connected curriculum that really prepares students to transfer their knowledge and thinking strategies across all of our disciplines. Our commitment to this, an example was that to change the scheduling, which we've made modifications to the middle school schedule, and also made some modifications to the high school schedule with the lunch and learn. So when we think about our transformative curriculum, there was really a major shift that we focused on in transitioning from what we call a classical curriculum to a more transformative curriculum. And in a classical curriculum, we are really conserving and preparing for a certain future as to comparing that of a transformative curriculum where we really foster students who can choose rather than hope to be chosen in a classroom. Under a classical curriculum, this is one that is very technical, where in a transformative curriculum, it's really adaptive to the learner. Under the classical curriculum model, it's really delivered as is, as opposed to a constructivist curriculum where the students are the learners and being shaped and being prepared for their 10,000 hours of interest that they take part in. A classical curriculum is designed to prepare students for the real world. While we are uncertain what that future holds, teachers know that the student's real world is really here and now. The classical curriculum is one that is opposed to errors, and educators, as educators, we're certain to call them out, whereas to be transformative, we really understand that learning is error enhanced. Some examples of the curriculum, transformative curriculum that have currently taken place. You've heard presentations around the integrated math, and we still share conversations and updates around that. We also have the high school writing centers that are taking place in both of our high schools, at Harriton High School as well as Lower Merion High School, where our students have the opportunity to really engage with their peers and provide feedback within their learning. We have the guaranteed maker spaces happening at the elementary level within the libraries, and also those maker spaces extending into the middle schools as well as the high schools. The foundational shift for the commitment to professional learning is transforming our approach to a professional learning from a top-down model to one that really honors and harnesses our educators' collective wisdom. We utilize our staff to be professional leaders within their craft of teaching, as well as providing venues across disciplines and buildings for professionals to collaborate, explore, and innovate in order to sustain their continual growth and support the intended outcomes of the plan. We are really hoping to have results-oriented professional development where our educators that are engaged are engaged and trusted. And this was really to transform and shift our student achievement to higher levels and using data to help inform those particular professional development opportunities. Under student-driven schools, we look to adjust our system from one that was really characterized as a heavily prescribed requirement to one that really affords students to be self-directed in their goal setting as well as their reflection and learning, giving students the opportunity to have choice in what they learn. Examples of this is the Genius Hour currently taking place at the middle school level, as well as the data that we've collected from the Challenge Success surveys that you've heard that provided district leaders, parents, and students opportunities to learn a little bit more about the areas of which professional development and student learning could be taking place and how we support students in their learning. Another example of that would be the 9th grade transition and how we're supporting students transitioning from their middle school to their high school, as well as a elementary student-driven learning plan. Under the spirit of community, the foundational shift was really to transform the approach of our community outreach to one that's really strategically leveraging and maximizing community resources to help strengthen our schools and have more community input and community engagement within our schools. Why we want to do this is to make sure that students have a meaningful internship or a service within our community, and much of this work is happening through our build-on experiences. Many of this is also happening through the the global citizenship course, where students are actually becoming more engaged within the community, and their learning is really extending outside of the classroom. I know that Ms. Buckman's office has been working very hard on creating these community partnerships and working very closely with communities as well as colleges and universities to help engage colleges and universities and community partnerships within our school district. We had 2 community feedback comments to this strategic plan over the course of the 28 days. The community comments you'll see on the left of your screen. The one community comment was asking to consider requiring 4 years of a math in high school, as well as reconsidering the current program of tracking students in math class as early as 5th grade. The district response to that is that we are operating under the state graduation requirement of 3 years for math, but it's important to know that many of our students are excelling and exceeding beyond those 3 required years and taking what's equivalent to 4 years or 5 years in math. We are addressing the consideration of the current program through tracking students as early as in 5th grade with the recent math changes to integrated math, and building in acceleration points in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, which is what we did. We didn't have that before. A second comment was changing the status from accomplished to under review under the curriculum section for the adoption process. The reason why that is listed as accomplished is that the Lower Merion School District, we have a curriculum that is well established. If we were to mark that as under review, what we're indicating to the state is that we don't have a curriculum that's well established, and we're in the process of developing that plan. So we do have an accomplished plan, but what's important to remember is that our curriculum supervisors are working on an annual basis looking at curriculum and making revisions to scope and sequence aligned to state results and data results, so that we are ensuring that students are getting the proper education that are aligned to the standards within our curriculum. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I know that all of these presentations were discussed at the recent curriculum committee meeting of the board, but at this time I'd like to open it up to any board member. Any questions at this time?
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert, and thank you, Mr. Cody. We had a robust conversation in our curriculum meeting last week. I did want, if you could speak to, I know we leveraged a consultant for aligning the very traditional comprehensive plan with some of the non-traditional and aspirational goals of the strategic plan. Could you speak to that a little bit more as well?
Yes, thank you for your question. We partnered with Joanne Parati from the Bucks County Intermediate Unit. Joanne was strategic in her leadership in supporting us. The comprehensive plan is a very sequential sort of canned report and tool. So Joanne really helped us think strategically through our strategic plan with the help of our committee to make sure that we're really aligning our goals to the measures that were in the comprehensive plan so that we are compliant.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Moving on, our next presentation is, I guess it's about a year and a half ago when we engaged and began to really develop our program in program evaluation. Dr. Christina Paul came on board, a special assistant to the superintendent for program evaluation and research. And what I asked her to do was the first program that I asked her to take a look at was the program of the Gifted and Talented program. So she did a full evaluation of that program and made recommendations, and now we've gotten to the point where the folks in charge of those programs are acting upon those recommendations, and so we're pleased that we're seeing fruits of our labors around the issue of looking in the mirror, seeing how well we do, and seeing what we can do better. So with that, Dr. Nure.
Thank you. So based on the recommendation from Dr. Paul's program evaluation, for the 18-19 school year, we are going to be focusing on 4 key areas: universal screening, professional development, service delivery model, and communication. In the forthcoming slides, I will note Dr. Paul's specific recommendations from the program evaluation and discuss the work that we will embark on. Additionally, I'll also make note of the action steps that we've taken thus far already with the Evaluation Use Committee. So this is the specific language from Dr. Paul's program evaluation regarding universal screening. What she indicates here is that we should consider hiring a consultant to examine our universal screening process with specific attention to examining bias, looking at and considering additional identification measures for our younger students, and also finding ways to support our multidisciplinary gifted evaluation teams in identifying students. We've begun conversations with 3 nationally recognized experts in the field of gifted education. And one thing I'd like to note is during our conversations with these experts, they spoke very highly of the program evaluation that they reviewed. And from the lens of the Evaluation Use Committee, it's very comforting to know that we have a strong document to work from. We're going to be making a recommendation forthcoming regarding a universal screening consultant. And that consultant will review the specific procedures that we are utilizing with our gifted screening process. And one important thing that they also be looking at as well is examining ways that we could continue to increase our numbers of underrepresented students in gifted education. Historically, African American and Latino students are underrepresented in gifted education, and our consideration of having a universal screening was intended to increase our numbers with those underrepresented groups. And while the universal screening has yielded some impact, we believe there's more work we can do, and we're hopeful that with the work of the universal screening consultant, we can make those meaningful gains. Next, we have the recommendation regarding professional development. And this really highlights the need for professional development for all teachers to support the needs of our gifted and high ability learners. Additionally, we need to find ways to ensure that our gifted students are having their needs met in gifted education and also in the regular education classroom. So for the 18-19 school year, we are going to collaborate with the Chester County Intermediate Unit, the CCIU, and their professional development gifted team is led by Dr. Patricia Egner. What really excites us about working with the CCIU is that unlike other consultants or organizations that provide predetermined models or approaches for professional development in gifted education, the CCIU works with districts to customize the professional development and training workshops so that they're very meaningful and applicable for the school districts. The CCIU also provides parent sessions, so in the evenings they provide conversation to parents about topics related to identification process, gifted supports, and meeting the needs of our gifted students. Teachers who are new to the field of gifted education attend what's called Gifted Boot Camp, which is an intensive training that provides information about generating GIEPs, understanding essential documents, and being acclimated with the state regulations of gifted education. Typically, we have to identify and find where the intermediate units are hosting these sessions. With our collaboration with the CCIU, we will be able to reserve seats for our teachers who are new to the field of gifted education. Additionally, the CCIU is able to develop a professional development session for all of our gifted teachers, which could provide essential information for our teachers new to the field of gifted education, but also provide meaningful information that could help be a refresher for our veteran teachers as well. The CCIU provides a teacher education series, which is an interactive series of workshops for a select number of gifted teachers in our district, where they can work through some challenging problems typical in the field of gifted education and provide some updates on state regulations. The Evaluation Use Professional Development Subcommittee has already started its work, and what we plan to do is have a district-wide professional development sometime in the spring focused on supporting the needs of our gifted and high-ability learners. We recognize that this is not a once-and-done professional development, and we are also in the process of developing a 3 to 5 year professional development plan so that we can build upon the momentum we have from this district-wide professional development. This is the specific recommendation regarding service delivery model from Dr. Paul's program evaluation. In it, it notes that we should consider revising or adopting a new gifted service delivery model that really examines and provides a continuum of services in gifted education. And by using the term continuum of services, it refers to the idea of having a menu of services and supports for our gifted education students so that we're not having one approach or one model of delivery service. The Service Delivery Subcommittee has begun working and researching specific models for consideration. There were 6 models that we examined that we felt were commonly referenced and researched in the literature. After we examine and research the models, we will have a discussion to determine which model or approaches to models we feel fits the strategic plan, the mission statement, and is most appropriate in addressing the needs of our gifted learners. We plan to consult with other districts and begin having site visits to get a sense of what these models and components of models look like and how they might look at our school district. The anticipated timeline is such that for this school year, 18-19, we will do the research, have the site visits and begin consultation, and also make a recommendation for the model or components of models to the core committee, which will then make a recommendation to Mr. Copeland and the school board. For the 19-20 school year, we plan on devoting that time for planning and preparation of the proposed service delivery model. We'll want to look at consideration for scheduling, so we'll have to work closely with building principals and also look at specific resources that'll be appropriate and necessary. So financial resources, human resources, space. And then for the 2021 school year, we're going to consider implementation of the model K-12. Initially, we thought of breaking the service delivery approach from starting with elementary and then going ahead the next year with secondary, but we felt in having these conversations, the dialogue lended itself well to having the work well for both elementary and secondary happening concurrently. Next, this is the specific recommendation regarding communication, and it speaks to the importance of ensuring information regarding gifted programming and service approaches are accessible to those in the district and those in the community. So we plan on having 2 community training sessions, one in the winter, one in the spring, and for this we will collaborate with the CCIU. We hope to have one related to gifted programming and the basics of gifted identification, and then hopefully in the spring have a different training session related to supporting the needs of our gifted learners. The Evaluation Use Core Committee has already started working on updating our website. One of the things we want to do is ensure that the website has meaningful information and that it's appropriate and user-friendly for those who access it, especially families and the community members. And then with data synchronization, we want to make sure that the data is streamlined so that teachers can access the information necessary for our gifted students. And here are some other action steps taken thus far with the Evaluation Use Committee. We've examined our mission statement, and we recognize that with the work we need to do with our service delivery model, there will be continual refinements to that, but we've already examined that, and we have a good sense of where we'd like to go with the work we do. We've established the middle school acceleration guidelines in much alignment with the elementary guidelines that were established a few years back. We've dedicated a lot of time during professional development for our gifted support teachers to participate in a lot of the work we're doing. We have some exceptional gifted support teachers who have a strong skill set and knowledge base, and we want to make sure we utilize their talents in the works we're doing now with the Evaluation Use Committee. And there's a lot of collaboration with the curriculum administrative team, from having members of the curriculum administrative teams on our core and subcommittees to constant communication and dialogue about the work we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the report and the plan. It's actually very exciting to see the first sort of evaluation now being implemented with, it was a very serious, thorough evaluation, and now we're seeing the fruits of that, and so that's really wonderful. But I'd like to open it up to Diane.
Thank you very much. At the curriculum committee meeting, we talked briefly about the mission statement and what the goals are of our gifted program. I know we're required to offer a gifted program by the state, but we want it to be meaningful and authentic. And so could you talk a little bit about, well, let me back up one second. And we're also talking about universal screening and trying to identify students who we feel are gifted but are not being caught in sort of the more typical way that one evaluates for gifted students. And I think that speaks to possibly a different way of learning as well as a different way of evaluating where they are. And I'd love to see that the gifted program really meets the students where they are. If they're creative and they need to excel in sort of a non-academic way, is there a gift? Are we going to address gifted in that way, or is it strictly academic? Can you just talk a little bit about the mission statement and what we feel our goals of the gifted program are?
Yes, thank you for your question. And I think one of the important things we do as we're exploring the universal screening process, we're exploring the mission statement, and most importantly, we're exploring the service delivery model. And I really believe a lot of the work really goes back to that approach, in that how we identify and how we believe gifted services and gifted support should be delivered. I think that impacts how we identify and how we nurture talent, how we view students who might not be gifted but have high abilities who still may benefit from supports. And one of the things we're doing is looking at 6 models that have very different approaches to service delivery, which have implications of providing supports to many students beyond just those who are identified as gifted. And I think from that conversation, we'll get a better sense of that continuum of services. Those who have needs, who aren't gifted, what supports do they receive? Those who are gifted, who need some supports, versus those who are gifted, who need an extraordinary amount of supports. A lot of that conversation's happening, and through that, we'll get a better sense of what our gifted program will look like, and then in turn, what our mission statement will essentially evolve into. I think we have a general idea of what we want our gifted program to look like, but I think it's slowly evolving into what we hope it will be.
I'll just throw one follow-up. I would strongly encourage you to look at giftedness beyond academic giftedness, so musical talent, artistic talent, that sort of thing.
Thank you for your input.
I would agree. I think that, though, we always walk and this is one of the reasons why I think I stated this last week, I like the fact that there's an emphasis on professional development beyond those gifted and talented teachers, because you want those teachers and those professionals who have expertise in that area not to feel that, well, that's the job of the gifted folks and so forth. And so I'm an art teacher, I'm a music teacher, I have a responsibility to seek and make sure that the talents and gifts of kids are found. I always used to say, what happens if little Tiger Woods had never seen a golf, who would have brought out that kind of skill?
Thank you again for the presentation. I really appreciate the language of continuum of services. I wanted to have you speak a bit more about how we incent our high school students who are identified as gifted into continuing with the program when we obviously know they've been identified for a reason and it can support them through the course of their trajectory in the district. But we give them, a third of a credit, and we don't necessarily recognize in a systematic way the way in which their already high achieving status can sometimes compete with them being identified as gifted. Has the committee started to talk about ways in which we can start to really maximize some of our students' needs and the resources that we can provide, particularly with our high school students who often opt out of the program?
I think that's an excellent question. In some of the conversation I've had with the expert consultants, what they've noted is that the needs of our gifted students evolve as they move through the grades. And one thing I do want to give credit to our high school gifted teachers, there are more students enrolling and staying in our gifted programs. And I think a lot of that too is there's focus on the social emotional needs of our gifted students. And I think as students evolve and get to the high school level, there's less emphasis, placed on the academics because we have amazing rigorous courses, but a lot of it is focused more on what's next. How do you navigate social conversations, academic conversations when you have so much to say, so many ideas to communicate? How do you do so in a context where there's certain limits to navigating that? So working through some of those social emotional components is an important conversational point at the high school level, and I think our gifted teachers are doing that, but that there might be more investigation as to how to meet the needs. And part of our work is not only identifying what teachers and parents think are important to focus on, but also looking at what the students are communicating, what their needs are, and working from there as that drives our service delivery approach, especially for the high school level.
Thanks. I really appreciated all the work that's gone into this, and it really resonated with me on every level based on my experience and one of my kids' experience with the gifted program in the district. One thing that I think is really important is especially at the early elementary level, to provide maybe. I feel like there's more options for stimulation and extra things in middle school and high school, and the pullouts in elementary are probably not enough for some of these kids. And also, as you were saying, there should be more opportunities for other kids to engage in some of the special projects that maybe only are available to the gifted program. Like I know there was like a government challenge that some kids could only and I understand you can't have everyone participate in everything. But I think there's more efficient ways to probably engage more kids. The other, just two other points I wanted to make. I think also a lot of these kids, especially early on and probably in middle school, have a lot of emotional, social like the intellectuals over here and everything else is over there. So if there's a way to, I don't know if you've thought about this, but just like social skills and making eye contact and a lot of the things that I've seen, like young gifted kids really need a lot of coaching with. So if there could be more of like a whole person approach. And then finally, especially now that we've gone to universal screening, I think some of the language, like everyone's tested for gifted, and then you get a letter back saying, you know, your kid isn't special. So I feel like there's a better way to, and of course, not every kid is going to qualify for the program, but there's probably a better way for that to be articulated. It's very bureaucratic and seems kind of, I don't know, cold the way all that information is communicated now. So I would love to see the district also think about, you know, how that information is conveyed to parents.
Thank you for your input, especially about the third point. We'll definitely take that into consideration. The point about the social emotional, I think that's very critical. And this year, we've had a lot of conversations in our professional development trainings about the social emotional. We've had some specific workshops on it, and what we are doing now is we're compiling the resources and the tools we're utilizing for our social emotional development of our students, and we're brainstorming ways to integrate some of our work. So that is a key focus of what we're doing. And your point about early gifted support at the elementary level, one of the key conversation points we're having right now with the service delivery subcommittee is, while we're looking at, you know, a model or components of models, really considering having different approaches for the different levels, having a different level of sensitivity, and you know, trying to be very mindful of identifying talent at the elementary level and ensuring that there's access to those supports. It might look a little different than what the needs are at the middle school level, but those are things we are considering right now. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to jump on and echo a little bit of what Lori just said. Listening to the presentation and reading over it, I kept thinking about, and this is not an issue for you particularly, but the way the nomenclature is particularly, I think, difficult for kids that aren't gifted, so to speak. You know, sometimes if you, or even the high ability gifted, and those that aren't. And so I think we need to be careful about how we do communicate it and how we do kind of differentiate the kids. And I was also wondering, in terms of the screening, will there be screening at more than one level? In other words, is there screening at elementary school, and then is there screening, what are there different levels of screening in the reevaluation of the program? Do you understand what I'm saying? And can you, is it a binary? You're either screened or gifted or not gifted for the rest of your career in school?
Yeah, so currently with the universal screening, we screen all first graders and all second graders, but it is just that it's a screener. And if students reach a certain score, then the achievement teams look at that and make a determination who moves forward for an evaluation. So it isn't even just the screener itself. It is a conversation deliberately among those achievement teams about each individual student. And there are monthly screenings that are also held across all grade levels. And there's also the ability for those achievement teams are bringing forward any concerns or any students to discuss, and it can come through in there as well.
Okay, so I mean, is that what our current practice now?
Yes.
And could you sort of just what would be the word? Give us an example of how many do kids join into the gifted program after second grade. I mean,
Absolutely, absolutely, the whole way through, and it could be students that have been here with us and also students who are new to the district.
I'd also like to add too, we have the mass universal screenings that happen in first and second grade. We also have monthly screenings that happen at all elementary and all middle school levels. So if there's a parent or a teacher that thinks there's a child who might be considered for screening, even if they've passed that universal first and second grade timeline, they can still have a screening. So we have multiple opportunities for students to be screened and evaluated at any time.
And I think an important part, I have to loop back to that professional development, because as we're doing professional development with all staff, part of that is identifying characteristics within students, and then what do you do with that within your own classroom, not just what happens in gifted support. And I think that'll be an important part of it.
thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions at this time? Virginia? I know, I have the same issue. We were just discussing this.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Nuri. One of the things that I keep hearing is screening, screening, screening. And one of the things as your communication action, it says data synchronization and examine alternative tools to be able to, to get the results for the screening. Some children don't test well, but they are gifted. And so I'm hoping that in your gathering of data for these young people to be put in or considered for the gifted program, you're not just looking at a screening per se, but other tools to be able to identify them.
I can say that one of the things that was a specific and targeted part of not only the evaluation, but their outreach to Johns Hopkins University was just that situation.
Absolutely. That is something that we think a lot about. We're going to put a lot of energy in trying to identify ways to. We know there are talented, underrepresented students, African American, Latino, who are not making it into our gifted program, and it's on us to find other ways to identify and nurture that talent because we know it's there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this time? No. Oh. Go for it. Okay.
Hi, thank you. Your presentations are always very thorough. I am curious if part of the professional development for all of the teachers is on grit, resilience, growth mindset, and those aspects of well-being that can be taught, that can be learned, that may then impact students' feelings of purpose and meaning in what they're doing, and maybe then, the resilience to stick with it and then maybe be identified as gifted.
We haven't identified the topics or themes, but we're in the process now of getting a sense of what we believe the building's needs are, the teachers' needs are, but these might be key concepts that do get addressed, I think, as they do relate to, meeting the needs of all students and not just those identified as gifted.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it.
And our final presentation of the evening is Dr. Paul is going to give us an update on where we are with the Adolescent Sleep and Start Time Committee. Dr. Paul.
Good evening. Good evening. It's good to see you all again. I am here to give you a third and final update on the work of the Research and Development Work Group, who has been working on examining the issue of adolescent sleep and the feasibility of modifying school start times to respond to the recommendations of the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Medical Association, the Center for Disease Control. These and other major health groups have made recommendations based on the science of sleep. The recommendations are that we should begin in middle school and high school. We should begin at 8:30 or later in the morning based on a shift in circadian rhythms that happens during adolescence. And so based on those recommendations, there have been a lot of national conversations around this topic. And so we, as part of All Forward, were tasked with this research and development work group to consider this issue. And this has really been a large group effort. I want to publicly thank everyone who has been involved. A number of departments have been involved and have dedicated a lot of time and resources toward riddling through this problem. And so I just want to thank all of those people for that. We formed this work group in winter of 16-17. We've given 2 previous updates of information to the board. This, as I said, is our 3rd update, and we will be wrapping up our work in the spring, and I'm going to show you a timeline of our work plan, and you'll see how that fits into the work plan. So my objectives for tonight's update are to share that proposed work plan for wrapping up this work and then transitioning into a stage where we can pull together some recommendations to consider, some specific recommendations to consider. And then the second part of my presentation tonight will focus on some preliminary analyses that our transportation department has been working on in regard to looking at an exploratory bell schedule that does respond to those recommendations of an 8:30 or later start time for middle school and high school. So that will be the bulk of the presentation tonight. And then finally, a brief update on some key summaries and recommendations from the Hanover Research Project conducted last spring, where they surveyed our staff for us on behalf of this topic. And so we're going to share just briefly some high-level recommendations that came out of the input that our staff provided through that survey. So for our proposed work plan, we'd like to wrap up this work from the Research and Development Committee by March of 2019. So several more months to wrap up some key tasks, which include, first of all, another Hanover project where they will be doing in-depth interviews with a group of key stakeholders that our committee has identified, touching on all of the different communities within our community, all the different key stakeholder groups who can share some feedback on some initial information that we provide to them through an infographic, and I'll talk more about the infographic in a moment. Based on the results of those interviews, we will then craft a community survey that we will put out there, again, in response to an infographic that shares some information. So part of this is that we want to educate the community on why we're even examining this issue and some of the key talking points around the issue. So we'll put that information out there, and then we're going to gather some feedback through the survey. And then for our final work products, if you will, the Research and Development Work Group will then present to you in March findings, a summary of all of the findings that we've gathered over the last months, and we will present them in 3 different reporting formats. First, an infographic, which is basically, imagine a poster that provides us a mix of visual and written information on some key highlight points. So for a person who just has a few minutes to say, hey, what's this all about, and can spend 30 seconds or 60 seconds thinking about a topic, the infographic is a great choice. The executive report would be more of a high-level summary of the key information that needs to be considered. And then on a website, we will be presenting all of the supplementary information, all of the tables of data that we've pulled together, all of the distinct sets of findings from the different data collection activities we've done over the last few months. So depending on who the audience is and what commitment they have to spending time thinking about this information, there will be multiple formats for them to access. So then in April, following our release of this information, we're proposing that we pull together a steering committee. And that steering committee would have representatives from all of the major stakeholder groups, and that steering committee would be charged with developing a set of concrete recommendations for the district to move this topic forward, to respond to the need for addressing adolescent sleep needs. We would like to propose that we have an external facilitator who will be the one to coordinate that steering committee. And in fact, we've started discussing this and have received a proposal from an external facilitator, Trago Ed, who is really an expert organization in helping organizations work through decision-making around really tough topics. They have a number of structured protocols that they work groups of people through to come to consensus. And so using the Trago Ed tools, Kathy Blackburn has submitted a proposal to come and work with our steering committee and to help develop that set of recommendations, as well as think through implementation of those recommendations that would then be moved forward for consideration. So our target is that in September of next year, we would have that steering committee then sharing their recommendations and their implementation plan with the community, with the school board, and then begin another round of soliciting feedback. And for this stage, we are borrowing from the Radnor playbook. Tomorrow night, they will be presenting their proposal that they have developed, and they will be shopping that proposal around to the different community groups over the next several months. They'll be having community forums, they're going on a teacher listening tour, they're collecting feedback from students. We really thought that model seemed very responsive. And so we're borrowing that model. We'd like to share those recommendations in September and then solicit feedback through community forums, student forums, teacher forums, these sorts of things. And then all of that information, the proposal as well as the community feedback on it, would come back to the Board of Directors next winter, winter of 2019-2020, for responses to that proposal and feedback. So that is our proposed work plan forward. So just to review, now I'm going to move into sharing with you another round of information that we, the Research and Development Group, have gathered. And this will all be put together in a final work product where you'll see the results of this work plus the other pieces that we've gathered through the past months. Okay, so here we are. We're going to update. We're going to start our update. I'm going to start the update with examining an exploratory bell schedule that responds to that 8:30 recommended start time. And then I'll give you a brief summary of the staff survey that Hanover conducted for us. Okay, so here are the current bell schedules that we are dealing with in Lower Merion. You'll see a few features to the schedule that I need to point out because these are some critical talking points in this whole decision-making process. We have 3 tiers, which means that each of our school levels are operating on a different schedule. Tier 1 is high school. It starts at 7:30, ends at 2:40. It's a 7-hour, 10-minute day, which happens to be one of the longest days in our region. Upper Darby, among the Central Athletic League, Upper Darby is the only school that has a school day that's longer than ours, and they're at 7 hours and 11 minutes, so they've got us beat by 1. Middle school is in the second tier, starting at 8:15, dismissing at 3:05. That's a 6-hour, 50-minute day. And our elementary school comes in last, starting at 9 a.m. and dismissing at 3:35 with a 6-hour and 35-minute day. So what would the implications be if we tried to get that middle school and that high school starting at 8:30 or later? With our 3-tier system, and also remembering that we transport to non-public schools, over 100 non-public schools we're transporting to every day in addition to our 10 public schools. That transportation system operates currently under the first tier, with non-public students riding the high school buses and coming to 2 transfer points, and then getting on a different bus to go to their respective schools. So if we look at this from a student's perspective, like I said, the middle and high schools are starting earlier than 8:30, which is against the recommendations. The dismissal times are aligned with the dismissal times of the other schools that are competing in the Central Athletic League, which means that at a 3:30 start time for a lot of our athletic events, our high schoolers are currently leaving, depending on the sport. Now, some sports aren't as affected as others, but a good batch of the sports, their teams are leaving at 2 o'clock, 2:15, or 2:30 to get to an away location that starts at 3:30. So currently, they're missing a portion of the last period of their day in high school. And for middle school athletes that are needing to dismiss early, they're missing the learn period at the end of the day, which is where a lot of our academic support is happening, and then part of the 8th period of the day. Because of the way that we are structuring our tiers with the elementary school dismissing last at 3:35, that means that any families that have older siblings with responsibilities for taking care of younger siblings are available. They're at home. They're available to receive those younger students off of the school bus if they need to. From a transportation perspective, the current schedule, as I said, uses 3 tiers, which makes our bus fleet more efficient. We have our first tier operating with that non-public school transfer system. And one feature that's problematic about our current schedule is note the dismissal times. We have a 25-minute and a 30-minute turnaround time between high school and middle school and elementary school. So if buses need to get back to schools to pick up the next load of kids, there's a condensed amount of time there. If you notice, the arrival times are positioned 45 minutes apart from one another, and that makes it a comfortable amount of turnaround time. So our bus fleet is more efficient in the morning than it is in the afternoon, because some buses aren't able to get back in time to get the next load of kids. So most of our buses are operating 5 to 6 routes per day. Ideally, they should all be doing 6 routes per day. Ideally, that would be the most efficient system. Okay, so we wanted to set up a schedule that would honor that 8:30 recommended start time for middle and high school, where we could have a 40-minute interval between arrival and dismissal time at the 3 different tiers. And we didn't want to subtract from the length of the current school day. We thought it was important to preserve the 7-hour and 10-minute day, at least for now, during our first exploratory schedule. And so in order to have that 40-minute interval of time between the dismissals, we needed to have all 3 tiers at a consistent length of the instructional day. So under this exploratory schedule, we have elementary, middle school, and high school at a 7-hour, 10-minute day for students. Now, if through further exploration and input, we decided we wanted to shorten that elementary school day from 7 minutes, 10 minutes, currently they're at 6 hours and 35 minutes per day. We could shorten that by releasing them earlier in the afternoon.
Let me just jump in, Christina.
Sure.
So one of the things that, I just wanted to be clear, we're not recommending this time.
Right.
We just are saying if we were going to give our transportation department something to work with, we had to give them something. And this is really the second transportation study we did. The first transportation study, we asked an outside consultant to do, and I was prepared to do that again. Our transportation office felt that while it literally took over 100 hours of extra work to do this, they felt that they could do it with far greater precision than if we outsourced it to another group. So that's what, but we had to give them something.
Right.
And so this is just to get a sense.
Thank you for adding that. And the other thing to clarify is that they actually took the student population as it is right now and rerouted them. So it is a complete plan for routing our entire school population as it currently stands. So this isn't just a simulation. They actually went through the process of rerouting for this schedule, so it was a very time-intensive process. So if we needed to shorten the elementary day, we could by releasing earlier than 3 p.m., but that also then presents some challenges for afternoon childcare. Any family who has to deal with afternoon childcare, it's an easier pill to swallow going from a current 3:30 dismissal to a 3 o'clock dismissal. The shorter we make that day, the more of a problem that might be. And then the middle school day could be shortened, but we would need to do it by pushing the start time past 9:10. Because if we released earlier in the afternoon, that again will create a need for more buses because we won't be able to use that high school fleet of buses as efficiently to get back and pick up our middle schoolers in time. Okay, so here's the exploratory bail schedule at the top. I want to go through some talking points with you. The first few points I've already mentioned. It's an 8:30 or later start time. We have 40-minute intervals between the tiers. The instructional day is maintained for our high school students. It is extended for our middle and elementary students, which would give us some nice opportunities, quite honestly, to explore additional wellness activities, physical activity periods, instructional periods, support. There's a lot we could do with that extra time. And then finally, by positioning high school in the second tier, it creates less of a conflict for the extracurriculars than if we were to position them in the third tier. So dismissing them at 3:40 would be less of a problem for our high school activities than dismissing them at 4:20. So some potential challenges with this schedule that we've identified are that we would be picking up students in the morning, elementary students in the morning in darkness for at least part of the school year. I'll give you more information, more detailed information on this in a bit. And we would also be dropping middle schoolers off in darkness for a portion of the winter as well. I already pointed out that many of our athletic teams who need to leave for early dismissal would still need to leave at 2:15 or 2:30, depending on how far they are traveling. So that means that our high school students would be missing the final period of the day plus a portion of the period before that. And the middle school would be missing the learn period, the 8th period, and part of the 7th period on those days where they do have to dismiss early. We've pulled the data on all of the early dismissals from last year, and we're in the process of calculating the hard numbers on what that actually means for different teams. Like I said earlier, some teams aren't affected, other teams are very affected. Golf, the golf team will miss a lot of school. They already miss a lot of school. So there are some considerations there with the sports and with the timing of the year. With this new schedule, we will have some families who all of a sudden have after-school childcare needs that they may not have had previously because maybe an older sibling was caring for the younger siblings. In fact, from our challenge success survey that we did with students last spring, we learned that 1 in 5 of our secondary students report that they are caring for a younger sibling 1 or more hours per weekday. So we do have a good amount of students who are responsible for caring for younger children. Under this schedule, the transportation for the after-school elementary academic support programs and activities would no longer be possible because the buses that normally transport them would now be transporting our high schoolers. So we wouldn't have an extra amount of buses to come back and transport the extended first day program, the RARE program, and other programs like that at the elementary school. And finally, the non-school sponsored extracurricular schedules would be affected. We learned through the Challenge Success Survey that our students are very involved in both school-based activities and non-school-based activities outside of school. And so with a later dismissal, all of our community programs would have to shift their schedules as well if they were drawing mostly from our district. And in what we've learned from other school districts is that by and large, everyone adjusts. But it would create a condensed amount of time in the afternoon between dismissal and a healthy bedtime. Just because we're dismissing later, it doesn't mean that kids are going to have the same amount of afternoon and evening time as they had before. If we're expecting them to continue getting to bed on time or even earlier than they currently are, because they're not getting to bed early enough in a lot of cases, that time in the afternoon and the evening is going to be condensed. So families are going to have to make some decisions about what they want to prioritize during their out-of-school time. So from a transportation perspective, we ran these, the transportation department ran these figures. They rooted our current students. They tried to maintain efficiency as much as possible. And they rooted the public school students first and then had to redesign the non-public school system on top of the new routes. So remember, our non-publics are currently transported during that first tier. So at this point then, if we were using this bell schedule, those non-pubs would be still going during the first tier, but the transfer points for 6 elementary schools is way more complicated and much less efficient than if we have 2 transfer points, as we currently do in the high school Tier 1 model. So based on these analyses, here is the result. The transportation department determined that they would need an additional 14 buses to be able to transport under this bell schedule. Now, the table you'll see in the left-hand column, that's where you see the buses that are currently used for transporting only public students, the buses that are used for non-public students only, which is 15, working our way down. 56 of our buses currently have mixed loads. In other words, that Tier 1 high school mixed in with non-public transportation. So shifting over to the right-hand column, this is where you see the breakdown based on the exploratory schedule. So you see that the number of buses needed for only public school students goes way up. Non-public students only goes way up. The amount of buses that we can have mixed loads under this model is reduced to 5. So, my next question was, how much does it cost to add 14 buses to our fleet? Now, I'm going to share some figures with you. We wanted to look at what it would cost if we were to purchase the buses outright, which would then mean we would also need to find a place to park those buses, which is already a hard, okay? And we also looked at the cost of contracting those buses. So here are the figures on purchasing a bus on the left-hand side and contracting a bus, which is on the right-hand side. A few features of this. The purchase price is prorated over 10 years. So that's why you see an annual cost per bus for purchasing a bus. So those figures include the maintenance, the fuel, the driver's salary and benefits, vehicle insurance, and then we need to think about parking. For a contracted bus, the transportation department pulled current contract figures to base their estimates. So these are based on what we're currently paying for contracted buses. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so there you see the difference, and then the total cost per year would be an additional $1.1 million added to the transportation budget per year. And then you see the breakdown if we purchase versus if we contract. So that's a ballpark of what we're dealing with in terms of the financial increases we would incur based on this schedule for transportation. What we haven't calculated, and I'm not sure that we could calculate it very easily, is with an extended length of the school day, For middle school and elementary, we would also incur other costs associated with staffing the schools, operations for the schools. I mean, I was even thinking about, I had a help desk ticket out from the technology department, and somebody was there helping me, and I said, hey, when does tech support start each day? And they said, oh, well, we start at 7 o'clock because the high schools start at 7:30. Oh, well, what time do you close each day? Well, 4 o'clock because we dismiss at 3:30. Well, if you look at this schedule, we would have to still start early because we would have an elementary school start of 7:50, but middle school isn't dismissing until 4:20, so we would even have an extended amount of time that we would never need to cover the help desk for technology. So there are lots of these little nuances that we're not including in these estimates, but I think you get the picture. So the simple answer to this is yes. Students will be boarding and deboarding buses in darkness. So there's this concept of civil twilight. This is the time just after sunrise, just before sunrise and just after sunset, when there's still enough natural light that artificial light isn't needed to continue outdoor activities. So when we're looking at what is the best ideal drop-off time or pickup time for kids, we would love it to be sunrise, sunset, but we could deal with civil twilight and civil dawn and civil dusk as well. So I pulled the numbers on civil dawn for the first of the month for the entire school year. Now remember that in the first week of November, we no longer have daylight savings time, so we shift an hour, we fall back an hour, if you will. So times change then. So on the left-hand chart, you see the times, the exploratory time schedule. On the right, you see the time that civil dawn begins. And one thing I learned that I hadn't accounted for early on in this process was that buses are scheduled to drop kids off at school 15 to 30 minutes before the start of the school day because of the breakfast program. And so when you see these drop-off times, you might say, well, hey, if we're not starting at 7, we're only starting at 7:50, why are we dropping kids off at 7:30? Well, it's because of the breakfast program. Now, the Food Services Department is looking into piloting a new format of that program where kids would no longer have to travel to the cafeteria to get their breakfast. Instead, when they got off the bus, they could go to the lobby and they could get a brown bag packed breakfast and be on their way and take it back to the classroom to eat, which could shave off some of that time. But again, that's something that we are looking at piloting to see if that would help improve those arrival times. So under this schedule, considering civil dawn, here are your breakdowns. The earliest estimated pickup time for an elementary student who is not requiring a special needs accommodation on the bus would be 6:45 a.m., which would mean that in the weeks before daylight savings time ends, and then again later in November through January 1st, about 10 weeks out of the year, at least some of our elementary students would be picked up in darkness before civil twilight. For dismissal, we have just the opposite, obviously, the end of the day. We're looking at the bottom of the chart, middle school. The last middle schooler on a big bus would be 5:10 p.m. And for students who have special needs for transportation, the last drop-off would be at 5:20 p.m. under this schedule with this length of day. Again, this is just an exploratory schedule. We wanted to see what would happen, and we wanted to run the numbers to see how could this be accomplished. So some key findings from this test scenario. One, if we change our schedules, our tiers, we're also going to need to change the non-public school transportation system, which is where we incur some of the costs. A large majority of the costs actually is because of the am I saying that wrong? I'm sorry, I'm pausing. This is an awkward pause. Sorry about that.
Move to the mic.
Much of the transportation cost increase will be due to the need to reconfigure the non-public transportation system. That's my point. Sorry for the awkwardness, everyone. Moving on. An additional 14 buses are estimated under this scenario, which will increase that transportation budget considerably. Now, one thing I didn't point out, it was on the slide, I didn't point it out, is that what we can't estimate at this point is the length of time that students will be on the bus. So it's possible that commute times could get shorter or could get longer depending on when they are being transported. Getting to school at 8:30 is a different situation than trying to get to school at 7:30. So traffic patterns, which eventually would likely adjust, that's what we've learned from other school districts who've done this, those traffic patterns will shift. Another thing to think about is we had some preliminary conversations about changing to a two-tier system. And in a two-tier system, we would be putting middle schoolers and high schoolers on the same buses together and dropping one batch off and then going to the other school to drop the other batch off. But that, again, would extend the amount of time that kids would be on a school bus because they would be picking up that many more students on their load. So that's something to consider. Third bullet point, some elementary students would be waiting in morning darkness for about 10 weeks. The same is true of middle schoolers arriving home in darkness for about 10 weeks out of the winter. Secondary athletes would miss more than one class period per day. And even the home matches, which currently begin at 3:30 for most of our teams, we would need to negotiate new times and perhaps still dismiss students early for the home matches so that they would have adequate time for warming up. That's another thing we learned from some of the districts who've done this. You have to really preserve the time, the amount of time that athletes have to warm up, so you're not creating a situation where there are more athletic injuries than prior to the change. Transportation for the after-school elementary program would no longer be possible. We would need to change the times that late buses are traveling. And then finally, secondary students would have a reduction in the amount of time they have between dismissal and a healthy bedtime. So families would really have to think about what they want to prioritize for those evening hours. So now I would like to shift. I have one more slide to share with you, and that is some key findings from the Hanover Research survey that they conducted with our staff last spring. So we had surveys that came in from 572 of our professional staff at elementary, middle, and high school. 151 support staff and 26 administrators responded to the survey. And the findings and recommendations that Hanover submitted to us based on their analysis was that later start times would have negative impacts on a majority of our staff members who responded to the survey, particularly when it comes to commuting. Across all three levels, elementary, middle, and high school staff, everyone preferred an earlier start time, as early as 7:35 for all three levels, in fact. Even the elementary staff responded to say they would prefer 7:35 because that means that their commute time is much less than if they're trying to commute later in the morning. The latest acceptable start time for a majority of the respondents was 8 a.m. for the high school staff, 8:30 for the middle school staff, and 9 a.m. for the elementary school staff. So even under this test recommendation where this test exploratory schedule where we're looking at starting at 8:30 or later for middle school and high school, our staff, they would prefer an earlier start time than that. So we would have some work to do there. And then finally, Hanover recommended that we conduct additional research to determine ways that we could help our staff minimize the negative impacts that they would feel under these shifted schedules. So as a reminder, in March, we're going to be delivering those final work products from the Research and Development Committee. That's our information gathering phase. We'll hand that information over to the steering committee, who will be facilitated by an external facilitator. They will work on developing consensus around some recommendations for the district, some concrete recommendations. We'll put that out there in September, gather feedback, solicit feedback on those recommendations, and then put it back to the Board of Directors to respond to the recommendations next winter. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. Thank you for this presentation and for just the thoroughness of the research that you've been leading and the process, which is, it's clear. I had read the report before, but listening to it, you start thinking of all of the issues that play into this. So I really appreciate the fact that you've highlighted all of that for us. At this time, I'm going to open it up to board members for questions or comments. Lori?
Yes, thank you for the presentation, and I think it's great that we're exploring this. I guess this is more observation. Right now, I have a child in elementary school, a child in middle school, and a child in high school. And I can see that this would be a major cultural shift for our community, not just as families and students, but also the teachers. And, I know there's a journey ahead, but I think there's a lot of issues to consider with the age of the child and being home with them in the morning versus after school, and the cost of childcare, and just immediately that could create some challenges for either people to get to work. I mean, all this. And my other concern is also just the amount of school missed, which was identified early, potentially by student athletes in high school. So, yeah, there's just a lot to think about. When I think about putting a first grader or even my fourth grader kind of out in the, that's just a very early start time in the dark for someone so young.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in one of the scenarios, I would have to leave for work and assume my middle schooler would make it to school, at 9 o'clock, which hopefully would happen, but, especially in middle school, that seems a little bit like, spinning the wheel. So I'm glad that we're going to give the community a lot of time to digest all the scenarios and bring in a consultant, because I think this would be a real operational change. And I know lots of places have done it, but when you start to think about the immediate impacts on your family and your lifestyle, and the child care, I'll stop talking in a second, but one thing that's really nice if you live in Kinwood is your middle schoolers get out, and a lot of them go and wait for their younger siblings at Kinwood, and then they walk those siblings home. So that's kind of like a really nice occurrence that happens now. So just interrupting some of that could be really disruptive for families. So that's just one early voice when you think of all the options, but I just wanted to make a few comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. David, you look like you wanted to say something.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm glad we're looking into this. I just have a couple comments. One, I understand, I believe the Central League has actually a committee that's looking into changing times throughout the league. And I know that Radnor's a member of the Central League, and I think tomorrow night you mentioned that they're actually exploring not necessarily moving forward, but going forward along the path that we're on. I think one of the assumption is, of course, with missing times and all golf team, I understand that, but how many kids are on the golf team? I mean, I love playing golf myself, and I wouldn't mind missing the school to play golf, but only a handful of kids. And the other thing, it assumes, of course, that the schedules aren't adjusted if we make the move, if Radnor makes the move, other schools in the Central League make the move and move together, then that problem goes away, right? And so I think that one of the other things is that I think the emphasis on all the difficulties in making the transition really, in some ways, it's all a matter of emphasis and it's a cost-benefit analysis in terms of what really are the benefits to making the change for high school students, and in terms of the stress levels and the recommendations by those, the Center for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the ones you named. And one of the things I noticed is that's really not much in this report in terms of what are the benefits. Well, I mean, the community should know what exactly the reason we're looking into this, not just to disrupt everybody's lives, but to really do something in the realm of public health. And so I think that would be something worth really emphasizing as well. And the other thing I was just going to mention is that, or I know that you travel around and you know other school districts have made the change and somehow they managed, and I'd be curious if somehow I feel like we're kind of reinventing the wheel that's been invented before, and sometimes are other elementary school kids that have made the change, are they going to school in the dark? Or how have they handled that situation? Of course, I don't think anybody wants elementary kids standing in the dark waiting for a bus. I don't think anyone would agree to that. I certainly wouldn't want that. But at the same time, the other question I would have is that in looking at the bus schedule, and I know this might be a question for our transportation people, but I just thought that in our elementary schools, which are centrally located among in their really neighborhood schools, it was are those schedules really 45 minutes to get to a school in an elementary school? I mean, how many kids really are affected in that way? Maybe you can address that question.
Hold on.
Yeah.
So let me address the first two that Mr. Feder mentioned. First of all, this is not the first report that she's done, and she has talked about, Dr. Paul has talked about the advantages of this and began the report with that. But we've asked her to look at the logistical issues, and so that's why this is here.
I wasn't in any way disrespecting or with what she has done. All I'm saying is.
Yeah, but and all I'm saying is that has been a part of prior presentations. This one was part of the logistics, and part of what not just Dr. Paul, but the committee's been looking at is that's one of the reasons why we engaged Hanover, was to say what have other districts done, what can we learn from what other districts are doing. We're finding that there were very few three-tier systems. And so we've tried to focus in on some of those three-tier systems to see if there are ways that we could handle it. Secondly, we're in the Northeast, so we get darker earlier. You know, we have shorter days in some of the schools that might be like, I've looked at some around St. Louis and other things like that. So I just wanted to share that. Aldous, you want to speak to the transportation?
Sure. We also, to add to Mr. Copeland's point, we are also unique by the shuttle system. Not many districts use shuttle system because it's a very difficult system to implement, and definitely not at the level we using it. Almost majority of our schools go through the shuttle system. So now we're entangling that. In regards to elementary schools, especially in afternoon, I'm even concerned if we're gonna have enough time, because right now in the high schools, our buses line up and wait for kids, and high school kids we give them 7 to 8 minutes to get on the buses and we are off. We don't have to worry if somebody's left at school. Parents can pick them up or they can call parents. We couldn't do that at elementary schools, and we have no place to line up there, so we would have to stagger the arrival. We could board 2 to 3 buses, maybe 4 in some schools at the same time, so it's not like they're getting on all at the same time. Kinwood probably will be fine. Gladwin, we have 20 buses, so it's going to take time, and they have to make sure kindergartners get on the right bus and kids, and then buses sometimes get called back because one student stayed back or got on the wrong bus. So it's that elementary time in afternoon. Until we really put it to the test, I'm not even sure if that's enough, but.
Thank
One
you.
of the things that we've also asked Transportation to do is, since we're really hoping to have a third middle school, we've asked them as the next step is to go ahead and try and route that aspect to see what impact that would have.
Did you, I'll be back over, sorry. Deborah, go ahead.
First off, I want to thank you. The other day when you spoke, I had to go. Sorry, I had to go teach. But you're very, very thorough, very knowledgeable. I think that the time that you've all put in, I think many people think it's just so, we'll just flip it. Let's just do it. And there is a lot more that goes into it. Certainly your civil dawn, civil dusk, and all of the bus routes. That being said, looking at it from a can-do, what is it that we need to do to make the plan work? You could probably give your research to the joint state government commission that's been tasked to do this research and to look at this, the start times, because you're so thorough. But many of the schools I know are on a 2-tier, so they're starting, they do, middle and high school are starting at the same time. I don't know if you want to put another 100 hours in rerouting buses and look at that, but I think we just have to be open to looking at what do we need to do to turn us to align ourselves to that vision of starting school time later.
I think you are going to try and take a look at the 2-tier, aren't you, Aldous?
Initially, we're going to try to take a look, kind of make estimate how many buses would it require. That's not going to be very good estimate because until you reroute it, you're not going to have it. But we'll look at a capacity of buses and times available to merge those tiers, and then we'll have some number. But yeah, we that is on our radar, the 2-tier system.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. I'm actually very encouraged by this because I think in a lot of ways, this is like the first run at it, and always with the first run, you continue to refine, and I think the work of your committee as it goes along and gets more information, I think we'll be able to make some refinements. I mean, just something quick. You talk about needing 14 extra buses, but that says we need, 77 buses for just the pubs. Well, that's basically taking us to 2 tiers. I mean, you can, with 77 buses, you can basically do about like all the elementary schools and 2 of the middle schools, and then you do the high school and the other middle school. So we could conceivably, with 77 buses, go to 2 tiers. And then maybe that solves some of the other problems in terms of starting times, not sending the little ones out in the dark. I'm not saying it works, and as Aldous mentioned, they haven't worked it through, but if you just do sort of quick back of the envelope math, it might be possible to go to 2 tiers with 77 buses. So then you ask yourself, is $1 million worth the benefits? And then it becomes a cost-benefit analysis, and that's something that the community and the board will need to work through with the process that you've outlined. And I think, I really like the process that you've put forward. The other point that I wanted to make has to do with the teacher survey. I'm just trying to find it here. What? It's the last slide. It was interesting that the elementary staff said 9 o'clock was the absolute latest that they really thought was adequate. Middle school said 8:30 was the latest, and high school said 8 o'clock was really the most acceptable time. And if you ask me, I think the demographics of our middle school teachers are very similar to the demographics of our middle school teachers as our elementary school teachers. Some are older, some are younger, some live far away, some live close. So I think that one piece might be more a cultural thing, and what you're used to, and any change is disruptive and makes people grumpy for a while. And so, that's something that, again, part of the cost-benefit analysis as we go through this. But I think your process is very thoughtful. I think there's going to, we have the opportunity to get a lot of really good information as we go to make this decision, and I'm really encouraged. I mean, if this is close to a worst-case scenario, I think it might be within our reach. So I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Stan, is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question or make a comment at this time? No? Okay, thank you again. We really appreciate the presentation. At this time, I will open it up for audience recognition on any issue, agenda or non-agenda items. And if you can come sign in with Ms. LaPera, and then when you're ready to speak, you tell us your name, generally where you live, 3 minutes. That would be great.
Hi, my name is Lisa Prosnitz. I live in Penn Valley, and I just really wanted to say thank you for all of this. I've been coming to a lot of the school board meetings and meeting with some of you individually, and I appreciate all the work that you've put into it. I guess the biggest question, and like Diane said, there's so many more discussions to be had, so I won't even address it. But just in the interim, we know that our kids are struggling, and we know that this is an important issue, and I'm just hoping that maybe we can start to think about ways that we can help to support our kids who are really struggling right now with the time change. And I don't know what those answers would be, but I just think it's something that needs to be thought about, especially in light of the results of the Challenge Success Survey that came back, which to me was maybe within range of other schools and other districts like ours, but really a loud alarm as to how significantly some of these pieces are affecting our kids' mental health and physical well-being, which I think is a cry from help from them, and I think needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. And that's it. But thank you all for being here and for everything you've done for them. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Kate Legg. I'm from Wynwood. I just want to also thank you for starting the conversation on starting school later. My kids are young, and so a couple of quick things. Younger kids getting on the school bus early, and I'm a firm believer that we can maybe get to the 2-tier and it won't be as big of an issue, but I don't do transportation. Little kids have their parents with them, where we have lots of teenagers out waiting for the bus without any grown-ups with them. So I just throw that out there, that we have kids out there anyway, at least the little kids have parents with them. And with regards to childcare, because I do rely on the fact that my kid doesn't get home till 4 o'clock as part of my childcare plan, it would make life easier in the morning if my younger one was out of the house at an early hour, and if I had a middle schooler. I know that when I was in middle school, my mom left it up to me and told me to get myself out of the house. But again, I think that the child care burden would just shift. And you wouldn't have as many people paying for morning care, you would have people in the afternoon. So I just wanted to throw those out there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sam Catania, a student at Harriton and a resident of in Haverford. So first of all, thank you to Dr. Paul and the board for your incredible work. I've been following this issue personally very closely, the issue of changing school start times for about a year now, and it's really great to see a lot of progress that's happened. I have to admit, hearing some of these numbers is a little bit disheartening for me. I know that changes aren't going to happen. If changes do happen, I know they're not going to happen next year, which will be my last year in LMSD, unfortunately. But I do believe they're really important for future generations. The science has obviously proven itself over and over again, and it's definitely time to listen to it. That being said, we do need to balance these major logistical concerns, and potentially some sort of a compromise is in order. I know the idea of having middle school first, then high school, and then elementary school has been thrown around a few times, and I know that doesn't give middle schoolers the sleep they should get, but I just think that's an example of something that might solve quite a few of the issues, actually. That being said, it's important to put a lot of the costs and issues in perspective. So, $1.1 million for more buses sounds like a lot, and it is, but it's also about the same price as hiring, 15 or so more teachers. And this year alone, we hired like 8 or more. And so I'm not saying it's a small number, but it's not huge either. And maybe it's worth potential budget cuts in other areas for the huge health benefits to adolescents. And so I won't pretend I have the perfect solution to this problem, but it might be worth some time to look into some other more compromise type solutions that balance logistics and health, which sounds really horrible if you put it that way. But I mean, you have to remember, we're not like dying right now. We're all going to school and we're functioning fine. And so, compromise is definitely an option, and it's important to look at it. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, well, the next Education Committee meeting will be January 19th at 8 p.m. We have some meetings in there, so I think we didn't get all the meetings on here.
We have a reorg meeting in December, so there's no education.
Right.
And then the new meeting dates will be on the November agenda, so then they'll be
Okay,
posted.
do we have the next business meeting?
19th.
The December 19th, yes.
That's, okay. I just want to make sure we announce that. Thank you. I didn't have it in front of me. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in with us this late, and have a good rest of the evening, and we're adjourned. What?
Go to bed.
Go to bed, that's good.